people are calling you, oh, the next Marcel Marceau, the next Robin Williams, does that kind of...
Fantastic.
Before Jim Carrey was Ace Ventura, The Mask, Lloyd Christmas, Bruce Almighty, The Riddler, The Grinch, or the late Andy Kaufman, amongst many other roles. Before Jim Carrey would pick up 6 nominations and take home 2 wins at the Golden Globes, all of them in the category for Best Performance.
It's gonna be so hard to talk out of my ass after this.
Before Jim Carrey's resume of work held a net earnings well beyond that of $5 billion. Before Jim would go on to break box office records in 1994 and become one of the biggest names in Hollywood. Before Jim Carrey would pose for a photo with one Michael McCrudden. Oh yeah, and Jeff Daniels was there as well. Now, as you guys typically know on this channel, this is where I jump right into the bio, but this time I'm gonna try something a little different.
Thank you very much.
What's going on, guys? My name is Michael McCrudden and welcome to Before They're Famous, documenting the life and career of Jim Carrey prior to fame. Now, in a lot of these videos you guys asked to hear more about me, what my life was like growing up, and well, I was Jim Carrey obsessed, for real. Now, I went to school to become a performer as well as a writer and a producer, and I actually went to work and put together a screenplay on Jim Carrey's life story. But breaks were hard to come by and I didn't have many opportunities to do anything with that script. So all of a sudden I was sitting around one day and I said, why don't I do a video? And that birthed the series Before They're Famous. Yeah, the first one I ever did, it was on Jim Carrey. Now you're getting an updated one. Why? Well, today's my birthday, and this is how I'm celebrating, so I hope you enjoy it. Jim Carrey was born James Eugene Carey on January 17th, 1962 in Newmarket, Ontario, Canada. The youngest of 4 siblings, the family would move around the Toronto suburbs throughout his youth. His father Percy, a retired jazz performer, turned bookkeeper in order to keep food on the table. Jim's mother Kay, she suffered from depression and paranoia, and she was unfit to work herself. Now the family, they quickly took notice as their youngest child was a wild child maniac. Even when he was a toddler in a high chair, he would form all sorts of funny faces, and the father Percy, well, this is something that he would encourage. Now when he was just a youngin', his parents, they purchased for him a pet mouse, and he realized that his mom was really scared of the thing. That's when he decided to let it loose around the house, and his mom, well, she wasn't impressed. She then sent him to his room, but he loved being grounded because in his bedroom he had a mirror and he would spend countless hours making funny faces looking at himself. In elementary school, Jim learned to make friends through hamming it up. The more laughs he got, the more popular he became. Then one time, the messing around, well, it went a little too far, and all of a sudden his head, it got slammed into his desk, and that resulted in him chipping a tooth. But that's a look he would reprise for his role as Lloyd Christmas. At home, Jim was given the nickname Jimmy Gene Stringbean. His favorite actors were Dick Van Dyke and Jerry Lewis, as well as Jimmy Stewart, John Wayne, Don Adams, and Frank Gorshin, who played the Riddler on TV's Batman. Now these are all characters that he would sit and watch the television an inch away so he could pick up all their mannerisms, become an impersonator of all their gags. He would also impersonate his mother's parents, because apparently they were huge fans of Grandpa's cough medicine.
Sucking back on Grandpa's old cough medicine?
No, oh no, sir. No.
Now, although Percy was employed as an accountant, the family still had very little and they were scraping by. Young Jim, he wanted to get for himself a bike and he would dream of it. Then one day, miraculously, he won a contest he doesn't even recall entering, and well, positive thinking and dream realizations, these are practices he still preaches today. His impressions were getting more and more developed, with him mastering the voice and the moves of Elvis Presley and Tom Jones. That's when he sent a resume to Carol Burnett in hopes of being discovered. Now Jim didn't hear back, but he did work out a deal with his 7th grade school teacher out at St. Francis Xavier Secondary School in Burlington, where his teacher would allow him to take to the front of the class at the end of the day. This was in exchange for his promise not to disrupt the class throughout the day. Now when Jim was just 12 years old, his father Percy was let go from his job, and from there, well, things would go from bad to worse. Looking for some positivity in the household, Percy discovered an ad for a stand-up club in downtown Toronto. This was Jim's big break, or that's what he thought. All of a sudden, the family got to work to prep Jim for this big performance. His mother stitched together for him a yellow suit. His father began writing him some material. But when he took the stage in front of an older audience, the crowd booed and a hook appeared on stage, pulling the then 14-year-old to the floor. Now all the family's hopes, their prayers, they were invested in young Jim being their savior at the time. Instead, they would have to look for something else. Out of desperation, Percy worked out a deal to have his entire family live and work as janitors at a factory known as Titan Wheels. Now Percy, he was employed as the security guard, and the children, well, they would have to wax, dust, polish, as well as clean toilets. The once young, beaming Jim became dark, frustrated, and resentful against the world. Exhausted and miserable, young Jim, his grades would drop at school. Eventually, he would drop out. That's when he spoke to his father, who had this to say.
You can fail at what you don't want, so you might as well take a chance on doing what you love.
So Jim decided to return to Yuk Yuk's, the Toronto Comedy Club, but this time he was only going to perform the impressions that he had long mastered. And this night, he killed it. Now I'm fast forwarding a little bit, but Jim's family soon joined him in his efforts to escape their lives of misery. They chose instead to live out of the family's Volkswagen camper van rather than work at the factory. Now at Yuk Yuk's, Jim was rubbing shoulders with the likes of Howie Mandel, as well as other guests who came to town, including Robin Williams. And everyone was asking about this young up-and-coming impressionist.
A man named Bojangles, and he danced for you.
Over the next few years, Jim went from being the new kid on the block to one of the biggest names in Canadian comedy. He landed work in both television and film, becoming a headline performer for Yuk Yuk's and making the front page of the Toronto Star with the headline "A Star is Born." Jim could now afford to move his family into a basement apartment in Toronto. Jim then decided to increase his profile south of the border. He built up a long-lasting relationship with Rodney Dangerfield. He auditioned for SNL, and he began working steadily at the Comedy Store out in LA. That's when Jim decided to make the move to Los Angeles, and within a few months he landed the lead role in the NBC sitcom The Duck Factory.
It's really not as bad as you'd think. I've heard the same thing said about raw fish. I wouldn't want to try that either.
Now just as quick as things would take off, they would come crashing down. The Duck Factory was cancelled after just one season, and all of a sudden Jim Carrey, well, he'd grown tired of being an impressionist. He no longer wanted to work with that material, so he decided to take the stage with no material. And he kept bombing. He found new mentors in Clint Eastwood as well as stand-up comedian Sam Kinison. All the while, he continued to bomb on stage night after night, performing with no material and no impressions. Now around this time, Jim also went through his most profound loss to date, his mother Kay. She passed away from kidney failure. But on the upside, Jim had found love. He began dating a woman by the name of Melissa, and when she became pregnant, well, the two got married. With few work prospects in sight, Jim turned towards the horizon and wrote himself a check for $10 million. Suddenly, things started to fall into place. He landed a supporting role in Earth Girls Are Easy, resulting in a friendship with the Wayans brothers, who were developing a new sketch show for an upstart network titled Fox. The show was called In Living Color.
There's no need for investing in costly weight sets. With just a little imagination, a few hefty household appliances will do just as well.
Now, due to his popularity on In Living Color, well, Jim Carrey would get standing ovations at his stand-up gigs before he even took the stage. It was safe to say at this point, Jim Carrey's career, it was smoking. Now, 1994, it was the year of Jim Carrey. A producer had long been hounding him to work on a film known as Pet Detective. Jim Carrey wasn't too into it unless he could rewrite the script. And they were like, alrighty then. During the production of this film, cracks in his partnership with Melissa began to take form, and her inability to deal with his stardom became a heavy burden. Jim would also lose his father Percy to lung cancer and Alzheimer's, but his dad died knowing his son had made it. At the funeral, Jim placed that $10 million check he had long wrote himself with his father. And the rest of the story, well, you know the story because this is Before They Were Famous. My name is Michael McCrudden. Thank you for checking out my personal channel. I do all sorts of celebrity bios on here. I've done a whole bunch of comedians and actors. You should be sure to check out that playlist. But also rappers. I've done YouTubers. I've done a little bit of everything. Athletes. Be sure to let me know who you want to see in a future episode. Also, be sure to check me out on Instagram and Twitter to wish me a happy birthday. Alright guys, I'll see you in another video. Boom!
I saw the light on the knob that I pressed my